Good morning, everyone. I just want to double check. Can you hear me? I know some folks joined after we did the sound check. Obviously, if you can't hear me, you probably can't hear that I'm asking, but either raise your hand or chat. Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Good morning. My name is Katie Ward. I'm the Marketing and Business Development Manager for OPM Center for Leadership Development, and I'll be moderating today. The webinar today is Work Now, Fostering Resilience Through Change. Before we begin, I have a few administrative notes to share with you all. It's going to be a recorded webinar, and the recording will be made available with the slides within the next 2 weeks. Second, I'd like to direct you to the top left of your screen where you'll see a box labeled Information. There you'll find the link for live captioning if you need it, some audio information, and some troubleshooting tips if you have any issues along the way. But you can also type in the chat, and I'll be here to assist. There's a group chat box, which you guys have already started using at the bottom left of the screen. And if you have any other technical issues, please post them in there as well. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please wait until that time to submit any questions for Andrea and Stacy, who I'll introduce in a moment. But we'll be using the group chat for those questions. And lastly, to ensure we get the most out of our time together today, please try to avoid disruptions. I know we're all busy, but hopefully you could take the time, or I'm glad that you could take the time today, and hopefully you can participate actively. And if you need any support throughout, just mention something in the chat and I'll assist with you. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters, Andrea Zappone, Personnel Research Psychologist, and Stacy Porter, Human Resource Consultant at OPM's HR Strategy and Evaluation Solutions.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. I am Stacy, and I am here with my colleague, Andrea, and we are going to be presenting to you today the webinar, Work Now, Fostering Resilience Through Change. During our Public Service Recognition Week, which does kick off today, we wanted to thank you specifically for all that you do as an individual in the federal service. We know the American people count on us and count on federal government every day, and you play an important aspect in that, and we appreciate the work that you do. I am going to be facilitating the slides here. I've got a few introductory slides to kick us off, and then I'll be handing it over to Andrea. To get us started today, I want to do just a fun little poll. Everyone take a deep breath, settle into your seats, and think about which fictional character would make the best pet. You should see a poll. Go ahead and respond. Oh, did it go away? Do you see it, Andrea?
No.
Okay.
There it is.
All right. We got the dragon and the unicorn coming in neck and neck here. All right. Looks like the unicorn's going to win. Wonderful. That would be my pick as well. Something about the bright, fancy colors. At least that's how my unicorn would look, and the horn and the magical features that it has. I do like the idea of an Ewok, though. They're pretty cute. So that was just a fun little get to know you icebreaker there. We're going to go ahead and end the poll and reopen our slide deck here. As we move into the slide presentation, like I said, I just want everyone to kind of settle into where you're at. Hopefully you can minimize distractions for the next hour. We have quite a bit to share with you, so we're going to be moving at a fast pace. But like Katie said, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to engage in the chat box. Another thing we want you to be aware of is that we're going to have you engage not only in polls, but we're going to have you use that raise your hand feature like Katie did for the sound check. You should see a hand at the top of your screen next to your mic and your video icons. So become familiar with that. And additionally, we'll be using the chat box in response. We try to keep you guys engaged, but more importantly, we want you to be able to sit back, reflect, learn, and find some emotional and cognitive relief regarding all the changes that you've experienced around work over the last 2 years. Most importantly, we want you to walk away with a boost of confidence in yourself because you are, in fact, resilient. Each of us are. We wouldn't be here continuing to work and even investing in what resilience looks like today if we didn't have some resilience skills already. So I think it's important. We've been through a lot of change organizationally. We're all still looking at change. We've been hearing, the future of work, what's that look like? And now it's becoming a reality for many of us. And so it's important to reflect in a positive light on where we've come from, how we got through the last 2 years, what skills we use, what we could maybe improve upon, and what are the best practices. All right, we all tend to have a general understanding of resilience. So today we just want you to gain greater understanding of what recent research is saying so you can deliberately strengthen your own resiliency muscles. So before I move into the next slide, I want you guys all to take a moment here. You can either shut your eyes, take a deep breath, but just for about a minute, I want you to think through some of the milestones and the significant events that took place from the first day you heard about COVID until today. Think about a few of those events that really increased your stress level. Think about events that maybe increase the stress level of those around you, but not necessarily you. And then think about what actions and behaviors you used personally that you're most proud of as you navigated all the change surrounding the pandemic and everything that we've had to encounter and overcome the last 2 years. All right. So as we move through the next couple of slides, I want to just introduce you guys. We've all, heard about change. We've been, sorry, I'm struggling with my screen here. We've all been talking through change, from one space or another. Use the chat to go ahead and share what kind of change that you're currently experiencing at work. Change in roles and responsibilities, great. Reorgs, returning to the office, quite a few returning to the office, balancing travel again. Yeah, going back to a more scheduled day potentially. Dress code, I hear that. And then the hybrid environment, right? We're all trying to figure out what that really means, how that impacts us as individuals working across teams and as leaders trying to manage hybrid teams. All right, thank you. So as you can see, many responses just in this group that we have on the phone, right? One of the important things to take a moment and think about is as you read these different responses in the chat, you probably have your own varying level of stress response to each of those particular items that have been shared across this cohort. Each of us react differently to certain triggers and changes, and there's many reasons for that. There are a lot of factors. But for a moment, I want you to think about your own stress response to the different changes that you've been encountering. I think we can all reflect and identify some stressors or triggers that caused a higher level of stress, and we can think of others that weren't that big of a deal. I know that when we were told initially to work from home for 2 weeks, that didn't seem like a big deal to me. I had an end date. I knew kind of what to expect. We already had work from home and telework, agreements in place. We had the technology. We knew what to do as an organization if that was something that was required, which it was. But then when school started shutting down, and the 2 weeks went to 4 weeks to 6 weeks, my stress level tended to vary a lot more. And for a variety of reasons. I think we can all relate to that. There's a variety of different research models, and there's tons of look at both like organizational stress models and individual stress models out there. But there are a few factors that some of these research articles kind of key into and start to focus on when it comes to stress and change in our individual responses. And one thing that I wanted you all to be able to think about is 3 important factors, and those are our individual differences, consequences of the change, and then our feelings of uncertainty around those changes. Those 3 factors tend to, vary in how our stress levels increase or decrease. So when you think about individual differences, this tends to be kind of your own values, what you perceive to be threatened by the change that's ahead. So when a change is perceived to be threatening to what you value, your stress response would increase. Seems natural and reasonable, right? The other thing to be thinking about is the consequences of change. But again, this is a perceived consequence, or they are perceived consequences to whatever change you're about to occur. Of course, those could be positive or negative, depending on the change. And then the other thing is our feelings of uncertainty around a particular change. This may trigger our stress response and increase stress more than likely. So as we reflect on those changes that we listed in the chat, and even the changes that you thought about, and that my first questions is I had you stop and take a deep breath and reflect on the last 2 years, I think you can see that your feelings of being overextended, maybe depletion of your emotional and physical resources, just that feeling of overwhelm varied depending on your individual differences, the perceived consequences, and then the uncertainty surrounding the changes. The combined effects of these 3 factors truly impact the way that we perceive, or that our stress level goes up and down. So that's something to sit back or use that as a filter, more or less, as you're continuing to think through the last 2 years. And as we switch over to Andrea, and she's going to dive more into what resilience is really about and what the different tools are that we can have in our tool belt. Those things that you had identified as behaviors or reactions that you're most proud of. I think you can think about those different decisions and choices and changes through the lens of these 3 factors that are on the slide. And again, you can see the varying level of stress depending on the different changes that we encountered. All right, Andrea, I'm going to hand it over to you to dive deeper into resilience and change.
Good morning and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to be with you, and thank you, Stacy, for allowing us to reflect how hard that these past 2 years have been, and how we continue to be in a place of change as we go back to work. We navigate our roles in a different way of working, and the impact of change and how it affects us all. Today, I will be talking about resilience in the context of change. And I think it's best to start with a framework. I am a personal research psychologist, so I do tend to geek out with the research. But what we have here on the slide is a process model that has 4 simple elements. So on the left, you have the baseline, or the starting point, as Stacy just pointed out, in terms of our individual difference in how we adapt to stress or change. Then in the top middle, you have the actual trigger, the thing that can cause that stress. In this instance, maybe it's going back to a hybrid environment. I saw somebody said, you know, having maybe to figure out our diet, you know, we have to maybe go back to eating out as we go back into the office. And then in the blue box is where we're going to have our focus today. And that is about building our personal resilience muscle, as Stacy said. What can we proactively do to withstand the constant change that we are still enduring as we navigate this new way of working and still, unfortunately, navigating some residual effects of the pandemic? Let's go on to the next slide and look at exactly what resilience means. There are over 100 different definitions in the literature that try to get at what resilience is. I very simply think of it as the ability to bounce back. You know, you think of the basketball that is up, and then it gets hit with the hand or the stress, hits the ground, and then it bounces back up. That action of where it bounces back up is really the point of where we meet resilience. Now, on the slide here, you do have more of a formal definition given by the American Psychological Association that talks about it being a dynamic process of adapting well in the face of a stressor. But again, quite simply, it's bouncing back. Okay, next slide, please. There are a couple types of resilience to think about. There's first the natural resilience, that DNA that's inside you that you were born with, and it's typically developed before you turn 7 years old. Next, there's the adaptive resilience, the kind that you develop when you're in that state of acute challenge or difficulty. And this is where you learn to change and learn how to cope. This is the trial by fire, essentially, that middle one. And then finally, there's learned resilience, where you can acquire techniques to help build that resilience muscle, and that can really be called upon and sustain you for the long term as we face different challenges throughout our life. So this learned resilience is what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay, next slide. It's important to keep in mind that our resilience is always changing, and there is certainly a contextual factor to consider. We have internal things that impact us. We have external factors, i.e. pandemic, that can impact our resilience. So if you don't feel well or you haven't had a good night's rest, your resilience might not be in that surge state. It might maybe feel like it's depleted a little bit. But it's important to remember that there is an opportunity and empowerment within ourselves to improve our personal resilience if we choose to work on it. Okay, next slide. And we have a poll. Thank you. Yes. So on a scale of, somebody's already, look at you all. Don't even have to read it to you. Yes. Where is your level of resilience today? All right, so it looks like we're fluctuating between average and above average, even some folks very high. It looks like we're at about, the majority are at 3, 4, 5, so that's good. And a couple people who are feeling like they could use a boost. So hopefully we'll get something here for all of you, depending on what your level is today. All right. Yeah, it's still early. Thank you, Amanda. Exactly. Who knows what's going to come our way? One more slide. Perfect. All right, so I want to take a moment here just to acknowledge that resilience alone is not a DIY endeavor. It's not necessarily a do-it-yourself construct. I can namaste all day at work, but if I'm in a toxic environment, it makes it extremely difficult to bounce back. So I just want to take a moment to recognize that the environment we're in very much impacts our ability to bounce back. But for today, we're going to assume that we live in and play in and work in an environment that allows us to build our resilience muscle. And in doing so, we recognize that there are some elements, as you can see in this Venn diagram, that we can take personal responsibility for. So we're going to take a look at each one of these in the next slides, each four of these components here. Next slide. So confidence refers to building a realistic, positive belief and attitude about yourself and your ability to influence things. And one of the ways to boost our confidence is to become aware of our strengths and to have a full understanding of what those strengths are. So use the chat real quick if you would. Tell me what how you would define a strength. Maintaining a sense of humor. Yeah, something I'm proud of. Performing a task. Flexible and willing to listen. What I can do very well. Positive attitude. Being a team player. Yes, I love the fact that some of you are even mentioning some of your own strengths, setting an example and influence. Yes, thank you so much. So a strength is something that you do well, as someone mentioned. It's something that comes naturally. And what I think is an important element to recognize with a strength is that it gives us energy. We don't necessarily feel strained or drained when we're using it. We get a sense of energy inside. We can feel it inside of ourselves when we're using our strengths. I think our bodies tell us so much about what's working and what's not working if we choose to listen to our body. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as I said, I love strengths because we all have them. And when we identify what our strengths are, we're starting from a place of abundance, not necessarily a deficit. We all have a very strong, or not all of us, but a lot of us have a strong negativity bias, and we're constantly thinking, what can I work on? What can I do better? How can I improve? But let's reverse that a little bit and start from a place of something that we already know works well. And on this slide, we have some character strengths, and these were developed from some researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. And these researchers identified values that are present in all societies, religious traditions, and cultures throughout the world, both now and in the past. And they have been upheld and really been pursued just for their own sake. And they're categorized by 6 virtues: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And there are strengths that are used underneath each one of these virtues. So again, when you're looking at these and you maybe identify with one or two of these strengths, I live in the transcendence world, in case you can't tell yet. But what makes you feel authentic, energized, and true to yourself? I'm hoping that when you look at this slide, you can identify one of them. We're going to put a link in a chat here in just a moment that allows you to take the values and actions strength finder. It's a free survey through the University of Pennsylvania that you can take, and you will get a report on all of the strengths that are listed on this slide. You do have to register real quick to take the survey, but I encourage you to take it and maybe enhance your overall awareness of what your strengths are. Okay, next slide. All right, so what do you get? What do you get when you leverage your strengths? What we have on this slide is some outcomes. So you tend to be more engaged both in your life and at work when you lean into your strengths. You boost your self-confidence, is what we talked about. You have a higher probability of attaining a goal that you've set for yourself, and you tend to have more vitality. You feel more alive when you see your strengths coming through in multiple ways of, of working and living. So when you look at this slide, I'd like everybody to go up to that hand there. Does everybody see that hand drop down menu in the ribbon up on the presentation? If you do, go ahead and click on the drop down menu where that hand is, if you see it, and check or click on the thumbs up if you're leveraging your strengths as frequently as you'd like to at work. Give me a thumbs up. And conversely, if you'd like to use your strengths more at work, give me a thumbs down. Oh, good, I see it. Okay, I see it coming up. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up. I'm seeing some thumbs down. Maybe people are just, not seeing the icon on the screen. That's okay. But maybe now that you have an awareness of the importance of strengths in building your resilience muscle, maybe you'll start to see them more. And I do encourage us starting out of a place of taking the survey to see what strengths emerge for you. Okay. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to move on to a second element, social support. And I know someone had mentioned at the beginning poll about what you're experiencing at work. Someone had mentioned, oh boy, now we're going back into person and there are some new connections maybe that I need to make. I know we had several people that were onboarded in the virtual environment, never got to meet them in person, and now they're coming into the office and we'll get a chance to meet and connect a little bit in person. So what does it mean to have a social connection? What it really means is that you have a subjective experience of feeling close to and a sense of belongingness with others. And research shows that employees who experience strong workplace support score higher on a workplace meaning scale than do employees who are in unsupportive environments. And here's a really interesting element about social connection. Have you ever felt more connected to a group of strangers, like at a concert, than you do maybe with your own acquaintances? That's because it is a subjective experience. Social connection has nothing to do with the number of friends you have or the number of people that you're connected to on Facebook or the number of community groups that you belong to. Rather, what it means is that it's an internal experience. It's a subjective connection that we have to a person or to people. So if you feel connected to others on the inside of yourself, even if it's a group of strangers at a concert, or even watching your favorite character on TV, your well-being and your resilience can benefit from that. I totally think that Mrs. Maisel and I would be great friends if we connected in real life. But when I'm watching that show, I'm feeling her and I know exactly where she's coming from. Okay, next slide. So the effectiveness of social support, it certainly depends on the source and the type and the timing of support that we need. And I'm just going to jump to the next slide. one of the things that you can do, and it certainly seems timely now as we're entering in the office either in a hybrid capacity or a full-time in-person capacity, is to look at our different key social networks. And the power of networks lies in its exponential power. So if you know 3 people and they each know 3 other people, you technically have access to 9 people. And if each of these people knows another 9 people, that number jumps to 27. So very rapidly, as you get to know more people within your networks, the ability to lean in and leverage these networks increases. So we have some networks here: your trust network, your advice network, your information network, and your socializing network. So we're going to do a poll here again. Go ahead. First poll. Let me see. Which network do you think will be most important as you shift to a new way of working? Yes. Your trust network, absolutely. I define that group as the people that I can keep it real with, right? I can be vulnerable, I can be transparent, and I can tell them what's really going on for me. Yes, and being able to do that, to express what's hard, what's not working, and what is working is really important as we think about going back into work. Thank you. And then we're going to do one more poll here. Which network do you think will be most important to you as you shift to a new way of working? So I think a lot of you mentioned about moving into the hybrid environment. So tell me about which network you think will be most important now as you shift. Oh, wait. Yeah, look at that. So the information network. What is happening? Can someone tell me what's happening, right? That's the question that I'm always thinking of. We're going to need a lot of communication. We're going to have to communicate our brains out, right? Like, where do I go for different kinds of information? How do I know what maybe my new roles and responsibilities will be? Is it still dynamic enough to where things are changing on a monthly basis? And a lot of questions that are being asked. And where do we go to find the answers? Absolutely. Who do we turn to when we need this information? Certainly is going to continue to be important as we navigate our working environment now. Okay. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. Thank you for completing those polls. Okay, so use the chat here real quick. How do you think you can benefit from social connection during these organizational changes you mentioned that you're experiencing? How can your social connection help you? If you could write that in. Yes, soundboarding, balanced, staying in the know. Information, all caps. Give me the information. Support, awareness. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, in addition to knowing where to get the information, when we connect with others and realize that they're experiencing the same thing, either in a good way or a bad way, we all of a sudden feel normal, right? We feel less alone. We feel like the stress that we're experiencing is not an isolated event. Yes, we remain grounded and we can move through whatever it is we're experiencing with someone else. And that was, I think, probably one of the harder things to experience the pandemic, in addition, of course, to getting sick and seeing others get sick, is the isolation. We were forced into social isolation, which as social beings is not a good thing for our well-being and survival. Absolutely. So I encourage you to find some social connections that you haven't explored yet and reach out to those that might have the information, resources, or just connection that you need to navigate this new way of working. Okay, next slide, adaptability. So we all have varying degrees of how we can adapt to new and changing situations. And the core techniques associated with adaptability are those coping strategies, right? So do we breathe through the moment? Do we take a walk? Do we eat something healthy? We won't talk about what those negative coping strategies are. Also, are we learning from our mistakes? And are we even stretching ourselves to learn new skills? But one of the techniques that maybe you haven't thought about when you're thinking about adapting is imagination. Um, when we exercise in imagination, we are giving ourselves the gift of time to generate options. I love options and hope, dare I say, options and hope, and consider alternative possibilities when we're faced with an uncertain or difficult situations. Now, when we're stressed, this whole idea of imagination can really go away and seem frivolous. And we're just trying to survive and get through the moment. But to make imagination useful to us during times of adversity, we have to exercise it before the crisis. And we have to exercise it often enough so that it becomes of who we are. It becomes a habit that we're using on a regular basis. Anything that you're learning today has to be proactively used and exercised before the acute stress. When we're in the acute stress, we go into automatic mode and we rely on things that are there for us already. So it's really about building this muscle now in small ways so that you can use it when you're faced with a challenge. Next slide. So Harvard Business Review came up with a list of 7 ways that workplaces can develop their capacity for imagination. So carving out time for reflection, wouldn't that be nice, right? We're all so busy. When do we have time to reflect? But if you can, even if it's for a minute, they say you can benefit. Ask active, open questions. Allow yourself to be playful. How about setting up a system for sharing ideas? Here's what I did to navigate this, difficult situation that I was faced with. Seek out the inconsistent and unexpected way of doing things. Try small experiments. I'm going to try to throw in maybe a open-ended question during a presentation today. Find ways to experiment with new ways of doing things, and then, stay hopeful.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. Not quite sure why we got all dropped.
What was that thing about adaptability? What was it? Yeah, guess what, everybody? That was a test. Probably the best way to learn. Okay, let's see. So we used our imagination, and we got back to being live here. So
Andrea, I don't think
yes,
we can see your video, so
let's just roll. We're just gonna roll. Everybody on this call is now in my trust network. Welcome. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're moving on, and we're going to talk about purpose. So I like to think of a visual. So I talked about the bouncing ball, and I think about purpose as a lighthouse. So if we keep an eye out on the lighthouse during a storm that we're in, we know that lighthouse is going to get us home. And some people even describe their purpose as the rudder in the boat that is life. And research has found repeatedly that people who have a strong sense of purpose not only experience resilience, but they also have better cognitive functioning and overall well-being. Even people that have been researched that have Alzheimer's. They are starting to find that those that have a stronger sense of purpose are less prone in some instances. So a real big benefit to life is to have a purpose. Three key questions. What is my purpose? What are my core values? And what do I want to do? Okay, next slide. One thing to mention too, when it comes to purpose at work, is that it really is an important contributor to our experience. We also feel a stronger organizational commitment and engagement. And I think as public servants, we certainly have a sense of purpose in what we do and coming to work each day. At least that's my hope for you. Um, and discovering one's purpose in life essentially boils down to finding one or two things that are bigger than yourself and even bigger than those that are around you. It's not just about some great achievement, but really finding a way to spend the limited amount of time you have on something that is meaningful to you. And on this slide is sort of a formula for how you can develop your own personal mission statement or purpose. I'm going to share mine with you. It's been life-changing once I went through the exercise of identifying what my personal purpose is, because I attempt to lean into it every day. And when I do, and I reflect on it at the end of the day, it's been a drop mic day. So let me share mine with you, and then I encourage you to develop your own. So mine is to live each day by striving to make an impact towards the greater good by loving, seeing, and acknowledging others. I will maximize opportunity to share information and experiences, build partnerships, and show meaningful appreciation for others' talents and strengths. I will remember that no one is self-made, and the human connection is why we are here. So I encourage you again to use this formula. It can be pretty quick to develop your own purpose. Okay. Oops. Sorry, I went on the slide view, not my slides. So there are two benefits that we gain when we have a sense of purpose and experience adversity. First, purpose gives us better orientation and direction in an unstable environment. Again, it gives us that lighthouse that we can keep an eye on in the storm. Also, perceptions of purpose can limit disruptions in emotional and psychological functioning during high levels of stress. So in other words, if we're in that boat and a huge ocean wave hits us while we're navigating the storm, we can maybe move through that wave a little bit better, all the while we're keeping our eye on that lighthouse, the purpose that we've developed. Okay, next slide. All right, so use the chat if you would. Um, how can personal purpose and meaning impact times of change? If you could go ahead and put the slide in there. Yes, gives you direction, passion, keeps you grounded, keeps you focused. Hope, yeah, foundation. Hmm. Yes. So, research that actually has been conducted during the pandemic has found that when comparing people who say they are living their purpose at work with those who say they aren't, those that say are in fact living with their purpose report levels of well-being that are 5 times higher than those that aren't. So there's actually been research done very recently about this idea. And also, those living with their purpose are 4 times more likely to report higher engagement levels at work and a general sense of commitment. Okay. So it benefits ourselves personally and it benefits the organizations that we work for too. So I guess you could say there's a business case for knowing what your purpose at work is. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to leave you with a quote here from Helen Keller. And it says, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. I think we're going to have some time here for some questions. I would love to stay on for a few minutes and answer those. So please put some questions in the chat. In the meantime, Stacy, anything to add or contribute?
Questions are coming in. It looks like some
Okay.
folks are typing, and then I will wrap us up in a couple minutes. Oh, we have a thank you coming in.
Go back to the purpose statement slide. So that was the, I can do that. Go back to the one with the formula. Yes. And this actually ties into doing the free assessment, the VIA through the University of Pennsylvania. If you do that, you will get some strengths and you can put those in this statement here. Oh, look at that. Karen Barbashak is back. Hey, Karen. Thank you.
There is a question here.
Okay.
The VIA link, yes, I can share that again. And then the question was, oh, can you actually repeat your purpose statement?
Okay. Well, I got
Yeah.
through it once not crying, so I'll try again and not cry when and that's what my body tells me, right? Like I had worked on this actually for a year. And I wasn't hitting it. And then I got it and I started crying and then I knew I was done. So, yes, thank you for asking. I would love to share it with you. So, my personal purpose is to live each day by striving to make an impact towards the greater good by loving, seeing, and acknowledging others. I will maximize opportunities to share information and experiences, build partnerships, and show meaningful appreciation for others' talents and strengths. I will remember that no one is self-made and the human connection is why we are here. And I certainly appreciate all of you. I don't know you personally, but I know that what you're contributing, as Stacy had said in the beginning, thank you. To what you are contributing to the American people and to your agencies is by no question having a positive impact and influence just by being yourselves. Any other questions?
Yeah, it looks like Tanya asked if you have any advice for teaching resilience to children.
Mm, yeah, children are different animals, aren't they? Their brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. So, developmental, psychology is a whole nother ball of wax. But I'm sure there are resources out there. And if you find any, would you let me know, please? I have a 12 and 14-year-old, and we're in it. Uh, so, yeah, I would love to know. I don't know any resources. Stacy, do you on children and resilience?
There are great resources out there if you research, if you just Google it, actually. But one of the things that I've learned and that I've used is to get 2 clear plastic cups and put rocks and sand, fill them with material. But in one of them have pre-poked holes, like with a nail, you can just poke a nail through it and then start filling both of them up with water. And those holes that you prepared ahead of time are representative of resilience skills, those things in your toolkit, character, problem solving, values that represent, and the water will come out naturally, right? Whereas the one with no holes, the water is going to overflow, it's going to be a big mess. And so that cup represents life, and how there's going to be tons of things filling our cup all the time. And if we don't have practice and we haven't continued to use those tools for resilience and even coping, you can use this with coping skills, which are kind of the same. But that we will, the cup will overflow and will not, you will not be able to flow with life and things flow through you. You will, it won't be as easy. But that was one
Love
particular
that.
hands-on activity. And I think you can even find that online.
Love that.
Yes, that is
There was
great.
also a question from Nancy. She asked, what percentage of purpose should you have with your work and life?
Well, this is starting to become a philosophy seminar here. I don't know what, it's all based on your individual differences, right? Some people would only need to feel 5% of their purpose being fulfilled, and others would say they need 100%. It's what's the right match for you to where you feel you are balanced and maintaining a sense of well-being and fulfillment from your purpose. That's an individual question, a good one. I wish there was a finite number I could give, but I think it really comes down to you and your person.
Yes, thank you guys so much for your time and for engaging with us today. It was a pleasure to be able to share with you. We, again, like Andrea said, thank you for your service. Hopefully you were able to take a moment to relax during this past hour and reflect on your journey. More importantly, that you can, look at what you've done over the last 2 years and recognize that you have been resilient.
Mhm.
You've got some of that muscle already built up, and some of the things shared today are just reminders of how you can fine tune, dial it in a little bit to continue moving forward. You guys take care, and I think you might have seen that the slides and the recording will be sent out within the next 2 weeks. You guys have a great day.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.